Hello and welcome to another episode of what I learned on my MBA today. Now, in the last video I said that I wanted to talk about what you should do as a company when you realise that your product isn't actually viable, and also move on a bit and think a little more around some of the issues I was talking about with targets and CEO pay and that sort of thing, shareholders, because these are the two very interrelated concepts. So, to put this into perspective, I'm really thinking of a company I worked with which had a product which had worked very well, been very successful for nearly 30 years before I joined. It's an IT company, and this was a software product which basically was its own programming language. You could easily write applications, and they worked very well. It was very popular in Japan because it could convert to Japanese characters very easily. Did a lot of very good things. But the application license, if you like, the thing you use to write them, had quite a hefty licensing fee, which is an annual fee for being able to use it and maintain it, support it, etc. And that was needed because there was quite a lot of maintenance and support and stuff actually going on. All very well, but a disgruntled former employee wrote a package which allowed any application written in this software to be converted to .NET very fast, easily. And the sales pitch was, well, if you're in .NET, there's thousands, millions possibly, of monkeys in India. I mean, this was really the attitude was, code monkeys, Indian people barely want any pay. Sorry, going off on an ethics tangent again. And so, if any future development works, you don't need to pay a license. You just hire some, guy who's working for peanuts to come and do it for you. And the license fee bit was annoying people enough that they went, yeah, okay, let's do that. So it was a one-off payment to this guy, and very fast, within a year, a huge amount of the installed base just vanished, which meant that the revenue... So, just to discuss a couple of key points in this, what we're looking at is the way a business is structured. You've got predictable revenue, which is kind of what's paying the bills, and then you're doing sales activities on top of that, which is going to bring in more revenue, and that's going to let you do more stuff next year, etc., etc. So the problem is instantly you've got a cost structure, which is to say how many people you're employing, and that's up here, and that's funded by all the work you've done up till now. Great, you've got a nice, viable, stable business. As soon as that revenue's cut out, you've got a lot of cost because you're employing a lot of people. You've got big offices maybe, and that's no longer actually supported by the money you have. So you need to find a different way of funding it, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So what happened to this business was suddenly they were no longer able to really provide the service they had been providing, because that product was kind of killed, because you don't want to go selling someone a product where the way you're going to be funding the sale is by ongoing license fees. When you know that a couple of months after you've finished your project, you might have your license fee bit just cut out from under you, because essentially you're giving it away for free at that point, or nearly free, which isn't good. So really that's do you know the Stephen Elop's burning platform memo at Nokia? So what he said to the Nokia employees was, with the rise of more modern smartphone platforms, Nokia's Symbian and the various things they had in-house under development to replace it simply were not going to be able to compete. And so it's we're standing on a burning platform. You have to get off this thing because what we're doing doesn't work anymore. And that's exactly the situation this company was in. And they came up with a few ideas which were quite interesting. One was to rebuild that initial application development, like that code language and all that stuff, into a very clever piece of software which would allow you to write applications which you could run on many different types of device without having to do a lot of rebuilding work, which is very hard to achieve. So that's great. You buy one, you make one thing, you can run it on a server, you can run it on PCs, you can run it on smartphones, and it runs differently on each of these because you specify as the customer, you specify how you want it to actually be working. So on the smartphone you might want a simplified smartphone app. On desktop you might want a very rich, full-featured thing. But this was great, but it's a very different sales pitch. And of course, it's at the same time, it's competing with both, what's it called, web apps, particularly with the rise. HTML5 was just coming online at that point, and also dedicated smartphone platforms. So this was always going to be quite a tricky sell, I think. The other thing they did was use this to write a very clever integration platform. And the integration platform was able to connect many different pieces of enterprise software and web apps, and to run workflow processes through them so that you didn't have to do very complicated and expensive ERP customization projects. And because this was things that if you buy SAP, for instance, yes, they can tie a lot of this stuff together. Some of it they can't, but even the bits they can, it'll take a very long time and it'll cost frightening amounts, frankly. Whereas we were able to do it very quickly and very cheaply. And this was good. But again, the problem with both of these, if you've got a new company, you're building up a client base, and so you're building up a revenue structure, and you're going to be building up the supporting side of the business together with that at the same time. I mean, this makes sense, I think. But what we were doing was we still had this existing business, but you're trying to ramp up this thing under it, and so there was obviously a huge disconnect between revenue and profitability and the actual needs of the business, which comes back to targets, because what was happening was that the board as a whole was saying, well, we need and this was of course a publicly traded company, shareholders need to still get their monies because otherwise they might sell off the business. So what we're going to do is ramp up the targets and really reduce investment. So actually what you're trying to do there is prevent costs from going out of control, but at the same time try to get more revenue in. I don't know why people think this will work, frankly, because what actually happened was that every quarter we would see that we were nowhere near the targets that had been set, of course, because you're essentially dealing with a new product. You're trying to sell it into businesses that have already had bad experiences, maybe, or they've certainly been annoyed enough that they wanted to leave, or you're trying to get it across to new businesses, and you're dealing with, hello, I've got this totally different thing to anything you've ever seen before. Do you need one? And they'd say, no. Frankly, it was very hard to get the conversations at a senior enough level that people might be thinking about it, and the people who were at that senior level tended to just go straight to a big consultancy rather than to a smaller independent company like ours. So we had these targets that weren't able to be met. So every quarter it was, wow, this is another really... Sorry about that, just dropping you again. Another really bad quarter. we need to work harder. If you read Animal Farm, I think it is very Stakhanovite in the sense of Boxer, the cart horse. It's always, I must work harder, and then eventually killed himself by doing so. And it felt a lot like that, because we were constantly being told, you have to do more, you have to get this revenue, everyone's jobs are at risk. Well, of course they are, because frankly the company's not doing very well. But there was no way to actually get that kind of money in. Things that could have been done if we'd maybe had very high budgets to advertise this thing with, it might have been possible. But then, is the return actually going to outweigh how much you're spending? I don't know. Certainly the revenue is going to come up a lot slower than the money you have to put in. Equally, if there was a large external investment, that would have worked. And this comes back to what you're actually trying to achieve with a business. Because actually what was nice in this place is they didn't actually say, well, you know what, here's our revenue, here's our cost, let's just get rid of everyone. And that was good, and I thought that part of it was very positive. Unfortunately, they weren't able to make the most of that by actually ever phrasing it in that way. I felt there was a sense of denial among top management that things were actually as bad as they were, because they were really, really bad. It was, everything had to be positive all the time, everything had to be optimistic. And so you weren't allowed to say, actually, you know what, the problem here is this product's really hard to sell. This market that we're trying to address doesn't actually want this product. You weren't allowed to say any of that. So that kind of squandered what I think could have been a really powerful source of goodwill among employees of, we really value you all, we want to do the right thing by you, and we don't want to sack you. Which is a shame, because it never. It's only now, actually doing my MBA course and looking back on this, that I'm realising that was probably a conversation that was being had at headquarters. Because the conversation we were always hearing from headquarters was, we're going to sack you all if your numbers don't improve. And it didn't work. It was negative, which is a shame, because that could have been so much better. And actually, an interesting side, so I'll just take a quick diversion back to the targets thing from the previous video. One of the problems with targets is that you focus on a very specific thing. And in this case, it also matters what exactly you're measuring. So part of trying to improve and sell more in an efficient way, the company invested very heavily in a marketing automation platform. But the way it was set up, possibly the way it's actually created, I'm not 100% convinced by these things myself, meant that there was a need to the targets that were set in the system and the way activities were ranked, because essentially what happens is that as people outside do certain things, they get points, they get a certain level of points, they get prizes, they get sent over to a sales guy to have a call. But what was happening was that it had been set up in a way that if they did unsubscribe, for instance, that triggered as, oh, high engagement, they've clicked a link. Yeah, it's the link to say stop bothering me. And so that was an instant sales call. Funnily enough, these weren't successful. Then you had the fact that in Outlook, if you want to delete an email, you open it and then delete it. And that was, hey, they've opened an email, they're getting points. So I looked at that. I was looking into why it is that the huge level of activity we seem to have didn't ever seem to be translating into any actual sales. And so I pointed this out and worked hard with headquarters to try to fix it. Even though the rational thing, if you like, for me to do in that situation would have been to keep quiet and basically play this broken system and make a lot of money. Instead, I forewent all the sales commission I would have got from just pushing these things through a broken system and try to fix it. And my reward for that was to be told that my numbers were the lowest of any of the marketing people. Which is again why I'm not hugely keen on target and bonus structures. You have to, or at least you have to be very careful what you're measuring and of the psychology of the people you're working with. I think that you do need to be extremely careful of that. And the other side then of the target piece in that company was that you have to make it realistic, because we were struggling with having any kind of interest in the product. So there was a sense that one way that we could do this was by trying to do essentially email campaigns, which, yes, they're a valid way of doing marketing. We did get some interest out of them. But there was a sense that because we'd invested heavily in this piece of software, that should be the, or at least that, I have to pick my words carefully. There are other sales activities which you can do effectively and should be doing constantly as a sales guy to be getting interest in. Now, that includes partnerships, includes using your own network, includes prospecting, and not everything comes through the marketing department. Sadly, it would be lovely as a marketing person if it did, but what I learned from that experience is it doesn't. But there was a sense that sales were just going to sit back and wait for opportunities to arise and to take the order. Look at Marcus Cauchi's videos on LinkedIn and YouTube. They are excellent explanation of the problem of an order-taking sales culture. Very interesting. Definitely worth a watch. So if you think of how how the company was in this problem of we've got essentially a new product, high cost base, which we want to keep. Let's just assume that's what was happening. It seems to have been. But the revenues are low because you've got a new product, not necessarily because the product's not viable. Essentially, the company at this point is in a position where it is not viable. You've got revenues that are too low, and unless you can get them back up, at some point you're going to run out of money. Now, first thing is you have to, in that situation, look at where you're going to get money from, where you're going to get opportunities from. There was a very strong sense of we can just kind of sweat the assets, if you like, keep using our existing customers, selling them more things. That wasn't really working. In fact, there was a constant sense that those existing customers were going to leave. Plus, there was a difficulty in really engaging with partners. And I don't know, I have to think more about this and maybe try to do a bit more research. I don't know whether it was a problem with the partners themselves not buying in, or if they weren't quite as successful as they were selling themselves as being, which is always a danger when you're working with partnership deals, or if it just needed more time to get off the ground properly. But essentially, the great thing with a channel partner is that they're going out and doing business anyway, and then they bring you in and sell your solution as well. It's how a lot of the big guys actually operate. Obviously, the ideal thing would have been to try to actually have a deal as an integration partner with one of these big companies, but they prefer to do it in-house, even though that's expensive and wasteful, because what they are doing is they're charging their customers a huge amount of money to do this very wasteful process, but they're profiting massively from it. So we would actually have been, in a way, too efficient for their operating model. Which then raises the question, if you got the right mix of partners, this probably would have been doable. What would have been needed comes down to the company ownership. We were a publicly traded company on NASDAQ, and with shareholders, and I think the group that we're part of, etc., were all hoping to get a lot of money out of this company. Therefore, I don't think the incentives for them were to invest heavily in really developing this product, which could have been brilliant, and make it very successful. What they wanted to do was keep essentially, they're stuck between two strategies. They didn't want to go all the way to sack everyone, take the cost out, but equally they didn't want to invest. It's a bit of a nothing strategy, and it didn't work because it is a nothing strategy. You get stuck in a trap with that. So I don't. In a way, this is one where I don't really know what my conclusion is, other than to say that this stuff is really complicated. And when you have a business that does suddenly find that its product doesn't work, you have to really take the time to understand what's going on, and how you can motivate people and make that effective. So I will leave you with that. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Monday. Be seeing you.